Lewis Hamilton's contract talks with Mercedes are yet to be continued, but that doesn't mean he isn't going to look at his other options soon, with one of the fiercest rivals for Mercedes, Red Bull, actually being a real possibility. It might seem like a too far-fetched scenario considering the rivalry that these two have between each other, but if you think about Perez's contractual situation as well, along with what Hamilton recently just said about being Verstappen's teammate, then we might see one of the wildest transfers in the F1 world ever. The summer break is going to be a very long period for 4 weeks without racing, but that doesn't mean we're not going to witness some drama happening off the tracks. And Lewis Hamilton seems to be on the fan side when it comes to entertainment, as he continuously provides statements that could alter his future in the sport. For starters, now he's dropped a bombshell on Perez regarding the second seat in Red Bull and said some things that can't be understood otherwise. Hamilton wants to drive for the Austrian squad alongside Verstappen to prove that in the same machinery, he's the better driver. But before we go into that part of our video, let's see why Hamilton is actually considering a move to another team and not trying to build from zero with Mercedes. First things first, Hamilton has always been devoted to Mercedes, and in the latest contractual talks with the Silver Arrows, he did say that it's his utmost goal to remain here and build the team from scratch back to where they belong, the highest place on the podium. Here, however, is the twist. Mercedes are not actually providing Hamilton with what he's desperately asking from them, a championship-winning car that would act the same on every circuit they visit without experiencing the troublesome inconsistencies week after week. Many have bashed Hamilton and Russell for not being able to provide solid feedback to the engineers as to where the car feels wrong, but more often than not, Hamilton has pointed towards issues that are constantly present in the car, and so far his cries have fallen on deaf ears. This has turned into an escalation from which Hamilton has had to go out publicly and say that the engineers back in Brackley need to take responsibility for their actions as to why the car performs the way it does. Needless to say, he's not the happiest man right now, racing for P2 and ultimately failing most of the time by different teams. In the beginning it was Aston Martin, and now that's McLaren, with the exception of Spa, where it was Leclerc. If there is a certain fact to be stated about Hamilton, it's that he doesn't want to be racing for anything below P2. But given the strict regulations from 2022, I highly doubt that Mercedes or any other team will make the necessary leap in order to challenge Red Bull for a championship sooner rather than later. And after Pat Simmons' devastating message that the 2026 regulations might not change anything in the pecking order for another 2 to 3 years, Hamilton might be forced to look for his future elsewhere. I know that stating that Hamilton and Red Bull are a match that will never happen is definitely something that goes through my mind as well. But after observing the facts, one of which stands out louder than the others, this is not a scenario that we should totally disregard. After all, Red Bull are on a mission to build a super team from 2025 onwards, when Perez's contract expires, and with Leclerc not being available for Ferrari and Norris committing to McLaren, they might have to switch their focus to the guy that they tried to beat for so long and finally did in 2021 under murky circumstances. Ricciardo's current performance is good, but it's definitely not compared to Hamilton if Red Bull were to pick these two as Perez's successor. And the trade would make sense for both Verstappen and Hamilton, because they would finally be able to battle it out between themselves in the right way, in the same car, at the same time, under the same conditions. This would definitely be the most interesting F1 season and something that would generate a lot of interest in the sport after the infamous rivalry between Senna and Prost back in their McLaren days. And as a cherry on top, Hamilton didn't want to shut down the rumours of a potential switch to Red Bull, and although it was more of an inconvenient way for him to express his interest in the Austrian squad, he still did it in his own way. This time, it was Perez who was the victim of his statement, as the 7-time world champion said, "At the moment, it's impossible to beat the Red Bull unless they don't finish. They're 0.8 to 1 second faster per lap than everybody else. It is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it. Do I want to be as fast as them? Of course. Would I like to have a car that's as fast as them? Of course. If I was in Sergio's car, Max would not be having the same time he's having now, but it's not the way life is. It's definitely not the way life is right now, Hamilton, and we can all agree on that, but it's not something that needs to stay that way for eternity. Controversial transfers have happened in the Formula One world before, and while Hamilton's reputation would definitely take one of the biggest hits that an F1 athlete could take to survive in the sport, he'll be much closer to his ultimate goal with Red Bull than he currently is with Mercedes, winning the record-breaking 8th championship. As all things stand, it doesn't seem like Mercedes upgrades are working wonders on the car, which only gives us one reasonable explanation for what is currently going on in Brackley. The team is absolutely without any ideas as to how to extract 1 to 2 seconds of performance like McLaren did. Everything is there for them, they know the way, they just don't seem to understand why the car behaves the way it does. And now I'm sure that they're in desperate need of help from the legends who helped build the team from zero, Niki Lauda and Michael Schumacher. Be that as it may, Hamilton continued to talk about the current morale of the team, adding, "None of us are happy in the sense that we're where we want to be, but we are continuously making steps. We've had podiums, we've had a second place, we've had a pole this year, which is really great. We're just making small strides, and we're looking for that big one to put us in contention for the top 2. It's not going to come easy, but everyone's working towards it. Through adversity, it's building character and strength within the team, and one day we will get back to where we need to be." But these small steps and strides have been continuously appearing in Mercedes' development season since 2022, and they still got a pole position in Hungary last year. That didn't mean that they solved all of their underlying issues. Even with the 1-2 win in Brazil, the team was still unable to follow the path that Red Bull did, which only goes to show one thing: experiments in the sport can only take you so far, and now it's very likely that Hamilton has been growing sick of being the experimental guinea pig and having his car tried out with lots of other setups that just don't seem to work. Helmut Marko, on the other hand, has praised the performance of the 7-time world champion and said that apart from Perez, Hamilton and Alonso are definitely the 2 drivers who can be as good as Max in the same machinery, even though he's still dubbed the 2-time world champion the better driver due to his extensive knowledge of the car's philosophy. All in all, fuels about Hamilton joining Red Bull are starting to become more and more present, and the fact that the Brit is yet to continue his contract with Mercedes only goes to push this narrative even further. Now it's Mercedes' turn to show that they have what it takes to beat Verstappen in the same way that he did in 2021, minus the budget cap breach and the last lap fiasco in Abu Dhabi. But regardless, not many expected Verstappen to be fighting for the championship that year, and Honda and Red Bull turned up with very competitive machinery, something that everyone hopes Mercedes can and will do as soon as 2024, because it's not something that should be joked around, as it has the capacity to kick Hamilton out of the team. Do you think there's a real possibility of Hamilton joining Red Bull? Or do you think that Mercedes will be able to give him the race-winning machinery for which he's been desperate for such a long period of time? Let us know in the comments below.